Who is liable for discrimination? Acts of discrimination committed by an employer are often committed by an employee acting on the employer's behalf. For example, a manager employed by a company may make a discriminatory recruitment decision, even though it is the policy of the company as a whole not to discriminate. The discrimination law does not allow employers to hide behind the fact that acts of discrimination are committed by employees without the employer's permission. The employer will be liable for anything done by one of its employees acting in the course of his or her employment, even if it is done without the employer's knowledge or approval. Tony is employed by Best Restaurants Limited as the manager of one of its 3 restaurants. He is tasked with recruiting a head waiter and turns down Stefan for the job because he is gay. When Stefan complains to the company, they apologise immediately and Tony is disciplined. Nevertheless, Stefan will still be able to bring a discrimination claim against Best Restaurants Limited. Tony was acting in the course of his employment when he committed the act of discrimination, and so they are responsible. The fact that they apologised and took action after the fact does not affect this, although it may influence the amount of compensation that the tribunal subsequently awards. The only circumstance in which the employer will not be liable for the discriminatory acts of its employees is if it can prove that it has taken all reasonably practicable steps to prevent the employee from acting in a discriminatory manner. Note that it is only preventative measures that can support this defence. It is not enough for the employer to show that it took reasonable steps to deal with a situation once the act of discrimination had actually taken place. What steps are practicable to prevent discrimination will vary according to the circumstances. However, the tribunal is likely to look for the following: a clear policy adopted by the employer emphasising that discrimination will not be condoned or tolerated. Training for managers and appropriate staff on equality issues and the need not to discriminate. A company culture which takes complaints of discrimination seriously and does not tolerate discriminatory conduct on the part of employees. Where these are in place, it is likely that a tribunal will find that the employer is not liable for acts of discrimination committed by employees. The issue of the employer's liability for the acts of employees is likely to be a particularly important issue in the context of harassment. Race or gender motivated jokes or insults are highly unlikely to be specifically endorsed or authorised by an employer, but if they are committed in the course of employment, then the employer will still be liable. There is no formal definition on what "in the course of employment" means, and in most situations it will be a matter of common sense. A manager conducting a job interview is clearly acting in the course of employment, as is one colleague talking to another during work hours. Even behaviour which takes place in a break is likely to be in the course of employment, because the activity is closely related to the work and arises from it. In contrast, a conversation between 2 colleagues, which takes place after work and is not arranged by the employer, is unlikely to be seen as something which happens in the course of employment, and so the employer will not be liable for anything that is said in that context. Julie works with Steve and has always got on reasonably well with him. Last Saturday, however, they were both in the same restaurant when an argument arose over Julie's recent period of time off work for depression. Steve made various comments in relation to this not being a proper disability. Although the employer might be entitled to discipline Steve for his behaviour, Julie would not be able to sue for disability discrimination because the abuse was not done in the course of employment. Therefore, the employer will not be liable for Steve's actions. One aspect of the test may be whether the employer is in a position to control what the employee does in the context in question. In most cases, the employer will be liable for actions that take place in the workplace or during normal working hours, but will not be liable for what happens wholly outside work, other than work organised events, e.g. the summer ball.